Dewberry. It was raining the Friday I seduced Mr. J. The 4th of July would fall on a Monday that year, so nearly everyone at Dewberry had already left to begin the long weekend. I'd overheard Mr. J on the telephone earlier that morning, something about a budget report and a deadline, so I figured he'd be working late. This was my chance to finally get him alone. As I turned the corner and ventured down the hallway, I could see the nameplate, J. Manning, Director, on his office door. Drawing closer, the muffled sounds of voices stopped me. Miss Marjorie was in there with him. I ducked into a side corner to wait. How typical Miss Marjorie would be the one standing in my way. As assistant director, little got past that woman. She let me know early on that my overly attentive behavior towards her boss was not going unnoticed. With a roll of the eyes and a patronizing shake of the head, I knew she dismissed my behavior as hot-in-the-pants teenage infatuation. But I wasn't the least bit discouraged. My abiding attraction towards older men was well documented within the pages of my diaries. Daddy issues, maybe. A psychoanalyst case study, perhaps. But mine was not to be confused with the giggle-infused devotion of a fickle teen. I had lost that innocence long ago, though, miraculously, hadn't yet gone all the way. Too many in my childhood circle had sexualized me at a young age, some unwittingly, some not. Mom's friends complimenting my double-A cups at age 9, a stepfather's overly affectionate touches. Funny, my uncle's relocation to our neighborhood soon put a stop to those. But most intriguing was that sense of empowerment. Eavesdropping on my aunt's conversations assured me a cute face and a nice pair of tits had a profound effect on a man and could take a girl far. Being aware of my blossoming sexuality was empowering, and when you have control over little else in your world, that's worth a lot. And there was just something about Mr. J. Something and everything. The 6-foot frame and hazel eyes demanded my attention. The dimple in his right cheek had me transfixed. The sexy, deep-throated Dewberry, whenever he answered the phone, cast a spell. It sure beat Miss Marjorie's deadpan. "Dewberry Youth and Recreation Center, can I help you?" The mischievous smile gave me hope something could happen between us that shouldn't. The walk finished me. A smooth, confident, broad-shouldered stride. He was fine, and he knew it. Heat washed over me whenever he came around. Counting on my skill at flirtation, I unleashed my best. "Good morning, Mr. J." "Good night, Mr. J." Never forfeited an opportunity to speak to him. Lots of eye contact, lots of smiling, compliments on his clothing, questions about his car. Men love to talk about their cars. I wanted this man to notice me, and notice me noticing him. Mr. J had taken up permanent residence in my thoughts, living rent-free in my head and appearing in my dreams in much too provocative a way. All the while, in reality, he was sending me gentle reminders that the boundaries between a teenaged girl and an authority figure must remain intact. Sadly, this only made me want him more. He teased and taunted me with his self-restraint and resistance. He didn't understand that there was just no room for restraint in this fantasy. A wife and kids didn't belong there either, and any thoughts of me retreating in defeat or in the face of sound judgment were countered with the egging on of my 2 besties, Ava and Amber. They reasoned it was time I became a woman, and I decided Mr. J was the perfect one to make that happen. This seduction was premeditated, but the timing purely by chance, maybe even fate, I remember reassuring myself. The voices drifting from his office finally stopped. 15 minutes might just as well have been an eternity. I watched Miss Marjorie finally leave, closing his door behind her, and walk down the hallway past the storage room and into her office. I was eager to make my move, but I hesitated to a count of 21 seconds. 1 1,000, 2 1,000, 3 1,000. Miss Marjorie was anal. She almost always realized she'd neglected some minor detail and had to double back for further discussion. I should have concocted a story to account for my skulking there in the corner in the event somebody walked by, but I hadn't. I should have been nervous, but I wasn't. I should have feared rejection, but I didn't. It must have been my aunt's voices in my head. All men are tempted by young girls, and the more they look at temptation, the better it looks. As soon as I appeared in the doorway, Mr. J looked up. I began talking and closing and locking the door behind me all at once. I knew exactly what I wanted to say, having rehearsed it in my bedroom mirror. You know how much I like you, but you keep ignoring me. You want this as much as I do, so let's stop playing these games. I'm not leaving this room until we do something. With that said, I slowly pulled the red polo shirt I was wearing up over my head and threw it at him. Raising his arm in a half-hearted attempt to block it, the shirt landed sprawled across the computer keyboard on his desk. The sudden cold from the air conditioner caused me to shiver. "Oh, you're serious?" His was more of an exclamation than a question. I responded by unzipping my jeans and peeling them down my legs and off. He let me stand there for a second while he took it all in. Finally, he stood up and came from behind his desk. "I have some condoms in my car. I'll be right back. Don't move." Heading past me towards the door, he checked the hallway and stepped out, locking the door behind him. I positioned myself in his chair, with legs parted and feet perched on top of the desk. The chair still held the warmth of his body, and it felt good against my skin. When the tiny clock at the bottom right corner of his computer screen showed 9 minutes had passed, I started to wonder what could be keeping him. Then I finally heard the lock click, watched as the door knob was being turned and the door slowly being opened. But it was Miss Marjorie who would be the one to darken that doorway. Funny how she wasn't at all surprised to see me, all of me. She'd been dispatched to deliver the news I was no longer welcome at Dewberry. Even worse, my mother had been notified and would be expecting me at home immediately. The applause abruptly summoned me back to the present. Much had happened in the 10 years since the seduction. Now, as a junior corporate art buyer, I'd recently commissioned the painting of a mural for the opening of this new community youth center. Its unveiling was now being met with generous applause, complete with whistles and fists pumping. I should have been basking in the praise of my first major project well done along with the artist. Instead, I was plotting a graceful getaway. I was discovering the world of community service and outreach was a small one, where everyone seemed to know everyone else. 2 neighborhoods so different and so far apart. What was J. Manning doing here? And why tonight? From a safe distance, I watched him work the room, a charmer mingling and schmoozing the crowd. Had he grown even more handsome and distinguished with age? His rejection had taken its toll, haunting me with little reminders resurfacing at the most inopportune times. Just when I was certain I'd somehow buried that Friday in July, something would happen to transport me back. I'd begin to doubt myself all over again, doubt myself as a woman. The whole world had known about it. Mom and Miss Marjorie had made sure of that. Shame and embarrassment was the point. Punishment aimed at ensuring I not only grasped the gravity of what I'd done, but vowed to never do it again. After a time, Mom suggested a written apology, if contrite enough, might grant me a reprieve back to Dewberry. Why in the world would I want to go back? Ever? I'd had 10 years to muster the courage to face this man again and explain myself and my actions, if that was even possible. Should I open with an apology? I thought for a second. No. Defiance took hold. Maybe Mr. J owed me an apology. He could have just asked me to leave his office that day. I posed no danger to him. He didn't have to sick Miss Marjorie on me. And call my mother? Really? That was probably Miss Marjorie's idea. A simple no from him would have been sufficient. Was I still obligated to even preface his name with a Mr.? After all, we were both adults now. Glancing down at the hors d'oeuvres plate in my hand, I realized I'd just devoured 5 mini pizzas without even thinking. Absent-minded eating was my way of coping, but this time the distraction had left me particularly vulnerable. When I looked up again, it was too late for an escape. Both my boss, Mr. Drake, and Mr. J were approaching and merely inches from me. "Jay, I'd like you to meet one of our rising stars, Miss Aurora Browning." Mr. Drake, a sourpuss type, was beaming with an uncharacteristic enthusiasm. Mr. J extended his right hand. It's a pleasure, Miss Browning. Likewise, I managed to say, tentatively shaking his hand. Was this a sick, twisted game he was playing, pretending not to know me? Mr. Drake soon excused himself, leaving the two of us standing there facing one another. I don't know if it was the wine, but I suddenly felt emboldened as I eyed him. I was worried for nothing. He doesn't even remember me. I almost said that out loud. It didn't matter. He was already reading my mind. It was the most gorgeous shade of teal blue I'd ever seen. Totally out of nowhere and seemingly without any context, Mr. J's comment was accompanied by a sudden nostalgic gaze, as if he was looking right through me into the past. He had lost me, but I continued listening. I'm talking about the beautiful bra and panty set you were wearing the last time I saw you. He had lowered his voice to an almost hypnotic whisper, but I could still hear him as though we were the only two people in the room. The bra was satin, with delicate lace trimming and spaghetti straps. A C-cup, I'm guessing. The matching bikini panty hugged your hips just right. In the front was a sweet lace inlay in the shape of an inverted triangle. The bottom tip of the triangle stopped right where your bush began. His breathing had become slightly labored. Mine had too, along with my composure. As I struggled to regain both, I also searched for something to say. If you were feeling me too, why did you have me thrown out of your office? Do you have any idea how much that hurt? He looked around, checking for any listeners. Your first time was not supposed to be some cheap quickie in some office with a man old enough to be your father. You deserved better than that. And, oh yeah, minor detail, if someone had caught us, it could have cost me my career, my freedom, my marriage, and the center, in that order. I hadn't thought it possible to feel more embarrassed than I did on that Friday, but it was. With so much at stake, I truly did owe Mr. J an apology, and I was about to offer it when he flashed me that dimple. But if you ever strip in front of me like that again, I can't promise I'll be a gentleman the next time. Do we understand one another? Yes, I think we do. Finally.